This is my first time to use the narration. So, good morning or afternoon or night, and I hope it's going well, and I appreciate the time you're taking out to watch my review. Who am I? My name is Jill Peterson. I am a student at Texas State. I'm currently with the Department of Occupational and Workforce Leadership Studies, and I'm hoping to be completed in about another 12 to 18 hours, I think. So I'm also a wife and a mother of two, and I've recently taken a position as a supervisor with the Department of Family and Protective Services. And so for the first time, I'm leading a team of 9 and kind of learning a lot about myself and about managing others. So this leadership class kind of couldn't have come at a better time for me. The book that we're talking about today is Radical Candor, Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity. It's a 238-page book that was published in 2017 by Kim Scott. It has an intro and an index in addition to the 238 pages, as well as kind of a how to use this book. It's available in text or audio. Audio is what I chose to do for this assignment, but I also have the text book for reference, and it's read by the author, by Kim Scott herself. Back from both bosses and employees, where everyone cares for one another and enjoys their work, and kind of to create a relationship of what she calls radical candor. The language in the book is really clear and appropriate. It takes kind of a form of radical candor, kind of brings it to life itself in the language by being really clearly written and to the point, kind of rarely beats around the bush, but rather gets straight to Miss Scott's point. As you'll see in the video attached, it is relevant. It's relevant kind of to life, to relationships, but the book is really geared towards leadership in the workforce. So it is very relevant kind of to today's needs. And if this narration works right, I will see if it will capture my included video.
The origin story of Radical Candor happened in the space of time it took a light to change. I was living in Manhattan at the time, and I had this golden retriever puppy named Belvedere, and I adored this dog, and she was totally untrained. So I'm taking her for a walk one evening, and she jumps in front of an oncoming cab. I pull her out of the way just in time, and I'm sort of standing there with my heart in my throat on the street of Manhattan, and this man looks at me and he says, "I can see you really love that dog." That was all he has to do to move up on the care personally axis. He didn't have to take me to lunch. He didn't even have to know my name. "I can see you really love that dog. But," he says, "you're going to kill that dog if you don't teach it to sit." That was a direct challenge. And then he points at the ground and he says, "Sit." The dog sat. I had no idea she even knew what that meant. And he looks at me and he says, "It's not me. It's clear." And then the light changes and he walks off and leaves me with words to live by.
The further summary of the book is kind of this thesis, which we've already talked about, to create a culture of radical candor, where caring personally and challenging directly is really emphasized. Some of the key concepts and main points, are really about creating that atmosphere that gives and receives honest feedback. So the caring deeply, or caring personally rather, really kind of sets you up to be able to challenge directly. She does tell kind of a funny story about Steve Jobs and one of the things he would do at his work, which she highly discourages, but talks about him kind of having the ability to look at some of his teammates, some of his employees, and just very directly saying, "Your work is shit." because they had a relationship where they cared personally. In that same story, she talks about Tim Cook, who's now the CEO, being willing to really sacrifice a part of his own liver for Steve Jobs when Steve was sick, and Steve kind of declining that. So it's this idea that if you have a very caring relationship, that then the feedback that is so vital comes much easier. So she also talks about being intentional with how you spend your meeting time with direct reports, as well as really getting to know their growth plan and what motivates them. What do they want out of life? What do they want out of their job? Where their goals are and how to motivate towards those, which really lines up with some of the path goal leadership theories discussed in Nordhaus this semester. She also talks about encouraging a team and the team to have accountability, as well as open debate and kind of that challenging directly culture being carried on, not just from supervisors to supervisees, but really the employees themselves kind of caring and being able to challenge directly, as well as them being able to challenge directly up. So that was important in one of the main concepts in the book. She also talks a lot about rock stars and superstars, and really just getting to know your employees and what their growth trajectory is. Are they somebody that's happy with their job and that's where they want to stay, or is it somebody that is really looking for upward mobility inside the company? The conclusions kind of the book is just that the radical candor, if you can build that relationship, it really creates that atmosphere where both organizations and individuals can experience growth through caring personally. Spent time doing her own startup companies. Some were successful, some weren't. She spent a lot of time at Google under Sheryl Sandberg, and she spent time at Apple as part of their leadership development curriculum. So that's really where most of her frame of reference comes from, but it really has some of the techniques and some of the ideas have been used worldwide, as well as, Google at the time that she was there had teams that were really worldwide. She talks about experiences in Israel and in Asia. So the organizational structure of the book is also really helpful and really clear. She has it separated into two main parts, where the first part is really setting up that management philosophy of radical candor, and then the second half is the tools and techniques to implement radical candor in your place of work. There's also a 6-page guide to getting started, kind of jump into implementation and the plan. There are clear transitions in the book, as well as re-referencing key concepts. So you hear care personally, challenge directly, radical candor. You hear guidance over and over. So she kind of has a way of re-referencing those key concepts throughout the book. The patterns of thought with leadership theories examined in Nordhaus was kind of interesting, and several of the patterns of thought that emerge in Scott's radical candor are similar to several theories of leadership mentioned in the Nordhaus text. And really, as I was able to read this book along with the class reading out of Nordhaus and looking at leadership theories, you really see it kind of lending some validity to the leadership style of Scott. It does kind of favor some of the aspects of behavioral approach theory, and just where it discusses task behaviors, which would be kind of seen to me as Scott's kind of call to challenge directly, and then the relationship behaviors of that behavioral approach, which really looks more at her call to care personally. It also mirrors some of the aspects, like I discussed on an earlier slide, of that path goal theory in leadership, and calls for leaders to kind of know what motivates their staff and where they are headed. Much of Scott's discussions with radical candor also incorporate servant leadership traits, and is also reminiscent of some of Nordhaus descriptions of both authentic and transformational leadership, which brings some validity to what Scott is doing and to what she sees as benefiting the workplace. Also, there was an article by Vic and Kim that looked at this call for radical candor. It was actually completed prior to the 2017 release of this book, but based on some talks she had done about radical candor, where she was already using that concept and kind of speaking out about her ideas and leadership. And it talked specifically kind of about negative feedback and how that is helpful in organizational improvement, and that radical candor may be a way to engage organizations in improvement through that feedback, or what Scott in her book really refers to as guidance rather than negative feedback. And that is by that Vic and Kim, which is included in my better feel for how to really improve some of my skills as a new leader, and just to learn really more about leadership. When I chose the book, I didn't know anything about it. I just thought, honestly, I could get it here in time. The cover looked nice, and I liked the way she was just pretty blunt, even in her how to be a kick-ass boss without losing your humanity. It seemed real straightforward, which is something I was kind of looking for. I really got a lot out of the book and things I'll take with me, as well as having that reference of how to get it started. I think that some of her discussions in part one of the book really reminds you kind of why you can make big mistakes by not offering direct feedback when it's needed, and immediately, so that people understand your expectations and can grow kind of as employees and individuals. I think that the author's goal is fulfilled, in her, just after the introduction, there's a short couple pages on how to use this book, and one of the things that she wrote was, and this is a direct quote, "What drives my mission to share the concepts and methods presented here is the desire to help you avoid making the mistakes I made." And I think she really gives you not only the philosophy of how to do it, but the tools and techniques, and then even kind of that how to get started guide, which is like some quick things you can implement to make sure that your team and your leadership is starting to use some of these ideas that she introduces in Radical Candor. So I would definitely recommend this book to anybody that's in leadership, anybody that's looking for a change, and maybe even those that aren't in leadership but are in an organization where they feel like there could be some improvements to their teamwork, or to even groups that they may have outside of work that really kind of would benefit from that open feedback, and from people understanding that that's just the culture, kind of a cultural shift to this what she calls radical candor, to improve really the organization. So that is my recommendation, and again, thank you for joining me.